This is the Waupaca Area Public Library's Lunch and Learn.
Thank you for all coming. My gosh, quite a turnout. I am Carla Ernst. I am the one that wrote this book that's floating around here called Life Without Pockets, My Long Journey into Womanhood. I wrote the book. I read the book. I liked it. Some issues with it, but at least I liked it. I found a page turner, so I think that's pretty good. But I'm not the best judge of this book because I'm not the most about me, and it's a memoir, and so I'm not a good person. But hopefully you've had a chance to read it or will read it. So that's what it is. I'm a woman, but I didn't start out this way. I started out as a boy. My sister is here, Barb. Barb is over here. Saw me as a boy when I was very little, and this was a kind of a long journey that I wrote about. And the book it kind of started out because somebody once said, asked me, is there anything difficult that you miss about being a boy? And the only thing I could really think of is that you don't have pockets. So that's what started the whole journey, saying, my gosh, you lose the pockets. So this is a difficult thing. So that led me to start to write the book. And the book started writing about 4 years ago. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we have a place, like everybody here in Waupaca, on Gilbert Lake, if anybody's heard of that, in Wild Rose. The Gilbert Lake section's over on this side, but all the Gilbert Lake people raise their hands. Just came out. So Waupaca is like my summer home for my life, and I also should add that I'm a member of the Waupaca City Band. I'm last chair, third clarinet, but hey, I'm in the band, so that's the important thing. Clarinet 6 out of 6, so it gives me 6 years to work up if I practice hard. So come see us next summer. I sell free tickets for that, but they are free. So, but we're here to talk.
We'll hear you for a song.
Well, for a song, that's right. And I would sign the program for you too if we had them, but I would do it. So it's a thought that counts. So come here. It's next spring, next summer. So this is about the book. I'll just kind of give a quick overview of it. Being about my life, it really talks about what's it like to have gone through what I've gone through, and the purpose of the book really is to help other people going through what I have, the challenges and the joys and what it's all about. And it's also more importantly, because you get a lot of questions if you go through gender dysphoria, they call it, or gender identity change. And it is really also to help not only people like me who've gone through what I've gone through, but people around us, friends and family, because it's very difficult to understand. It's hard for me to understand. It's hard for really anybody to understand. So the book was really an attempt to kind of put that all together because you get so many questions all the time. My most common question people say, oh, Carla, when did you make this change? Usually I say Tuesday, about 2:30. I went to my doctor and said, I'm kind of tired of this man thing. I said, can you fix that? And she did. I went out, bought girl clothes and went back to work. It's no big deal. But you do. Any guy who's thinking of this realize there are consequences. You lose the pockets. So don't do this willy-nilly because there's a little bit of a challenge with that. So that's what did it. So I wrote the book over about 4 years, and I think because you get a lot of questions, the book goes through a lot of detail, both medically, emotionally, psychologically, all the things that a book like that are about, and what I went through myself. So I wrote it also because I decided to give the context of when I grew up, the time, the era. I'm originally from Chicago. 200 years old. A lot of people don't realize that, but 200 years old. You see a lot after a while. And so the book really goes through a lot of those bits and pieces from that perspective. It's the thing that was interesting, though, about the book, about 2 years into writing it, I go out for dinner Thursday night with a bunch of women in Milwaukee. We call it G&O, Girls Night Out. Wonderful women. Many of them are also transgender women of various sorts. And just sadly or tragically, a couple of years ago, one of the women named Karis, was being bullied. And that happens a lot. That's one of the challenges of this, or trans bullied. She was a very talented school teacher in the Milwaukee public school system. And after about 10 years of it, we knew she was struggling, but after 10 years, she couldn't take it anymore. And sadly, she took her own life. And it was just tragic for all of us, all our friends, and many, many friends she had that I learned later about. And so Karis Ross was the person I ended up dedicating the book to her. And to me, it gave the book a focus. The focus is really about if it helps one person prevent them from taking their own life, then I feel this book is a success. And even in the short time it's been out since June 7th, and it is available, by the way, at the bookseller. There's thousands of copies, well, maybe 1 or 2 copies down in the basement. John, where are they, in the basement? 2 copies? 10 copies, you said? Okay, well, run over there quickly. And also my publisher is here, Kira Henschel. Kira, where are you?
I'm in the back.
In the back, okay. She brought a box of books. She has 3 more copies there. And they are available if you'd like to pick some up. And you also can get them in the library, right, Peg? So that's exciting. Okay, after tonight, there we go. There they are. In the Gilbert Lake section is where they are? Okay, great. You're right. So anyway, so the book really had a focus in terms of preventing suicide. And even in the short time, this is even hard to say, 3 people that I've known of, one in person, had come to me and told me she was going through a very difficult time after a divorce, and she happened to have a copy. She had read the manuscript a couple of years ago, and she was acknowledged in the book, and she sadly had checked her into a hospital for like rehab for alcohol, and she was in there 5 days. She had a copy of the book with her. She said she read the book, and that got her through that difficult time. And she said when she saw her name at the end of the acknowledgement section, she said she burst into tears. And she said at that point, she said, somebody in the world cares whether I live or die. I've decided to go on with my life, she said. I tell you, that just hit me so hard. Not only she's a wonderful friend, but it's having that effect. And so if the goal is to help prevent suicide, then that's great, and that's the whole purpose of the book. So I feel really good about that. And the feedback so far that people who are reading it have said, so many people come to me just over and over, have said, gee, I have a friend, a family member, my own child that is going through gender identity dysphoria, and they find that this book is helping them. So that's really the purpose of the book, and that's what's happening, and that's I'm very pleased that's here, and it's available here in Waupaca, in my home summer town. So in a nutshell, that's what the book is about. Let me just ask you, at this point, has anybody read the book? I read it, so I'll have to. With me, that's what, 3 people with me. For those that have, any questions so far about the book? No questions? Okay, I gotta go. Bar and get some drinks. I'm also honored, my very good friend Marilyn Apps is here, and Daryl, who's also an author, wrote the book Perennials. He's a noted retired, so if you're bored with my book, you always can read Daryl's book, Perennials. Is that here in the library? I hope it is. Good, I'm sure it is. But anyway, anybody have any questions about the book? Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I really liked how you broke out the difference between gender and sexual orientation and body part.
Thank you.
That's because I think that's one thing that a lot of people wonder about.
They do. Okay, her comment is great. I speak about, let me back up. We live, as the book says, in a very binary society, 0, 1, good, bad, up, down, so forth, including male, female. And in the reality, if you read about it in any kind of level, gender is very, very complex. I mean, I'm hardly an expert in it myself, and as I say in the book, I didn't understand all this. But the point you brought up, something I talked about, is there's 3 different kinds of planes, if you will, that are connected but are not the same. And that's gender identity, that's how you feel in terms of your maleness and femaleness. And that turns out to be, most people are not all male or female, they're somewhere in between on a spectrum, and that can even change over time. The second area is your sexuality, and that's your relationship with another person, and there are only 4 mathematical possibilities, somebody of the same sex, opposite, both, or neither, and that can change over time too. And in the third area is our physical bodies. Our bodies are not perfect specimens, well, except for maybe Peg, the library. The rest of us do not have bodies, so it's rough. And I bring that point out because we're all different sizes and shapes, and that doesn't affect your gender or your sexuality directly. So I gave a talk at this years ago in New York at Columbia, and the point I made is that our bodies, as we grow, let's say you're going through puberty, if you're a woman, if your body doesn't grow out as you think it should, logically you'll never say, gee, my body didn't come out, I must be a boy, or vice versa. If a male doesn't develop perfectly, they might say, oh, that's not right, so I must be a girl. You never hear that logical, rational thinking. So that's kind of a good example of how those are different areas, and there's a lot of material available, and I think that was one of the challenges putting this book together. So much stuff out there on all these different topics, and another challenge is just to simply scope the book. There's so many areas that you tend to find, you go down these rabbit holes in different, like transgender children, the political aspects, just endless stuff that can come out, and because I had to sort of stop writing at some point and sort of give it a stopping point, focus. But that's very out there, easy to find, but that's what that is, those 3 different areas.
You were.
Is that Stephen?
Yes, that's right. Very good.
Steve and I are old friends, and we will go way, way back. Was it 10 o'clock yesterday?
Yeah, well, no, 9:30.
Was it that early? I'm amazed I've had a friend that long. That's a long friend.
You should remember since I interrupted our conversation.
Yeah, you did interrupt me.
I was so rude.
You were very rude, but you came up, I was in the parking lot, I came up and he said, are you the woman that's speaking tomorrow night? I said, no, I tried to deny it, but I had my book and he recognized the picture. And so Stephen saw me.
You were talking about terminology. So it's a kind of a superficial question. I'm not sure if it's the same for everybody. But you're a woman. Do you still call yourself transgender?
Great question. I talk about in the book. I see myself as a woman. I've been this way maybe 30 years, but the book, that's why the common question, oh, when did you become this? I've known since birth. I knew as early as I can remember. And the book talks about the different times in my life. It talked one point, a chapter called Superboy, Supergirl, and that's a short chapter here at Gilbert Lake. I remember distinctly, as early as I remember, I was a big fan of Superman. In fact, with cousin John, Cindy, John and I used to sit in your cabin and read important literature like Superman. And in those days, I had 3 incredible heroes. That was Santa Claus, Jesus Christ, and Superman. All 3 great heroes. They're great. Santa Claus was great because he had the presents, but he really couldn't fly without the sleigh. Christ is great, but there's some issues with the Father and the Holy Ghost, very confusing. But Superman, that was a true hero at that point, at least with John and I. And so one time I was reading a comic book, it was actually a Superboy comic book, and that particular story, because they ran out of stories, he wakes up as a girl. So the Venerable Ma Kent in Kansas, and I'm not marginalizing Kansas because I'm a KU Jayhawk, I'm a sister or brother-in-law. Rock Chalk, Jayhawk. Do you want to do the chant, guys? Rock Chalk, Jayhawk. So this little story, read the story, and so she's a girl through the story, and she goes out and saves lives, and then I think she's hit by some kryptonite or something and ends up being a boy again. And I'm thinking, at that young age, so why can't that happen to me? I just wake up some morning and be a girl. So that was a constant thought in my mind all the time. Having 4 sisters, I always would go to my mother and say, why can't I wear dresses like Barbie, Susie, Sally, Elizabeth? And she said, well, you're a boy, you're not allowed to wear that. So you just accept that because that's what you're told, but this dysphoria, or this dissonance, is just going on in your head all the time, 24/7. Trying to figure out why, because I didn't understand it. Nobody really understood it. And really, pre-internet days was very difficult to understand it. But Stephen, that I've known my whole life. So, and the book really talks about, I will sort of say, plateaus of discovery. And a lot of people talk about in terms of transition. I don't think of that. To me, it was more of a realization of who I was since birth. It just took kind of a while to get to my point, but here I am. And I think for me at least, and I think others say the same, once you become your authentic self, it's a very, for me, joyful, happy, normal experience. So to me, it feels very normal. It doesn't seem strange. It's what I've always known it was. It just takes a while to kind of become yourself. Yes, ma'am?
How did being transgender affect your work life?
I would say it's challenging, difficult. For me, it's been not too bad, but most people, you have an 82% unemployment rate with transgender people, and I was talking, I think, with my sister the other day. The stories I know and people I know who have advanced degrees, master's, PhD, are working as dishwashers, and that might be because they transitioned at work or during the work process and were let go or trying to get a job. And now, again, that's changing, and the book talks a lot about that, how transgender in general is changing because there's really three things. One is a much better understanding of it. People is treated much differently now, more fairly in the media for the most part. If you think not so long ago, it was sort of a Jerry Springer subject, all these very strange people. Now it's all over, particularly stealth. People live a stealth transgender life where you don't know they're transgender. That's not unusual. And so in that process, the people are but still very, very difficult to get work or maintain work. And the stories are endless, but it's about an 82% chance of being let go or not getting a job. And that breaks down to other subcategories, harassment, things like that, within that 82%. And there's many, many studies on that, but that sort of summarizes them all together. So work is hard. And same thing else. The downside is getting health insurance, jobs, acceptance in society, many other mugging. I mean, you can get injured and killed. I've lost friends. I've been mugged myself once, twice, but once very badly. Had my skull broken open because I was found. Some people thought I was a transgender woman, which I was, or am, but that was many years ago. But it was a pretty horrible experience. Yes, ma'am.
Are there laws in place to protect people who are transgender?
Yes. Here in Wisconsin, there's 62,000 transgender women. That's a lot. And they're not all in Waupaca. Some of them branch out. Some are in Iola. You'll find somewhere in Wild Rose. So the greater Waupaca area, you'll find them. But laws, yes, there's many in Wisconsin that have been changing, and that's pretty recent, last 5 to 10 years. There's laws that one gives you a card because you can be arrested, and if you're the definition, as I talked about this in the book, the best, probably most common, is the APA, American Psychological Association, says you're simply, your gender identity does not match your birth identity. That causes all kinds of problems. So we get to legally, if you, what do you do with your driver's license, Social Security, a million things, and all that has to be changed, which is really difficult to do. It takes years, but the laws protect that. So as an example, a recent one is a state law that you can get an identity card that gives you your name or the name you prefer to use, and it says under your sex part, it says a male, female, or non-conforming is a common word, or don't wish to identify, and that's being accepted now in Wisconsin. Many, many other laws, so in terms of discrimination, many people can represent you in that, in all the different areas, but legally it's getting better and better. Media is changing it differently. It's sort of less of a stigma than it was certainly 5 to 10 years ago. Everybody thinks of Caitlin, who was very visible there. Whatever, I'm not particularly a big fan of her personally, but I just don't connect to the things she's involved with. But it certainly gave the whole community a lot of visibility, for sure. In fact, I watched it at Pat's and Elle's house. Remember that we saw it that night, the interview on ABC, and it really gave a lot of visibility to give it sort of somewhat a fairer treatment than ever before. Since then, many, many other shows, Katie Couric, for example, has done a lot, particularly recently with last couple of years, some specials on National Geographic, very in-depth pieces on gender identity dysphoria, things like that, and many others. And and I refer to my book, there's a lot of books, a lot of media, a lot in the movies, books, whatever else. Okay.
We no longer ask for gender identity on our library card registration.
Really? Interesting. Okay, well then, congratulations. So I would say from now on, check out all your books at the Waupaca Library. The card is, and I have 4 more cents on my card from those late, I'm so sorry. That's why we're all here today. So she wants me here to pay back that 4 cents. I'm so sorry. I'm getting through the book though. But that's great news. And you're seeing that. It's a great question, it's a complex answer. And these things are constantly changing all the time. Excuse me. One thing I did, because it's such a dynamic topic, that I set up a website called lifewithoutpockets.info. And that is, I'm gonna get some water here. that Jen? But the laws are changing dramatically, favorably, slowly. That helps in all the different areas that I think is the perception is changing. That's making a huge difference.
Carla, with your grandma telling you she was your little girl and you'd play dress up and dance,
Right.
was that your secret with her? Did she share
I
it
think
with
so.
Grandpa? Or
Well,
anybody else?
yeah, she's raising, if you read the book about that. I'm also, be pretty open here, I'm born what they call intersex, which means you're born with both physical parts, female and male, and there's different levels of that. But I was uniquely, my particular pediatrician, in those days they would, because the stigma around it, would do things. They would make physical changes and say, well, we can make her a girl or a boy and go back to the parents. In my case, they did nothing. They said, well, let her or him grow up to be what she or he thinks she is. So that's sort of a type of transgender. In my case, that's what I was. But I didn't know because I was too young. And but I always felt feminine since that day one. But what was sort of odd, and that's why the book talks about this, my grandmother had always seen me as a little girl. So she would say, you're my little girl. And a lot of people say, oh, what a horrible childhood, what must have been terrible. To me, that was my sense of normal. And we spent time with her on weekends. So so she just treated me as a girl. So she would, Barb here knows her grandmother, she would treat me more as a girl than a boy, and not always dressing me up. But she just, if you look at it, the era she grew up, born in the 1890s, formerly boys were dressed up like little girls, and that she had those clothes, and she was very into little tea parties and dolls and stuff. So that's just what we naturally did. She also was a gifted artist. So that was a very normal, comfortable thing, but yet my parents really raised me more as a boy, more kind of a tomboy. So it wasn't a dissonance for me, it just seemed normal. I didn't have anything to compare that to, so I thought all grandmothers raised you as a girl, parents raised you as a boy, until I got older. Saying that's not normal, not common. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but then, was there a secret between your doctor and your parents, or did they just say, oh, healthy baby boy?
No, I think, if you read the book, there's a quiz coming up, Mary Jo, in about a week. You better bone up in this. That's why I wrote the book. Just the nature of my parents, wonderful, that both passed, but had just very loving, wonderful parents. But I'm also the oldest of 7 kids, and I was the only for a while until Barb came along, and Susie Salad, Tommy, George, Elizabeth. And I think it's like kind of growing up in the Army, very busy life. And I think, they obviously knew, but they just weren't that focused on it, because it wasn't really an issue in their mind, nor mine. It just wasn't a problem. So I don't think they paid much attention to it. Because it wasn't a problem per se. So that's what it was like for me, at least. Others maybe not so, but that was my view of that, what happened to me.
Do you think your email has evolved into a book, and then did that make you an activist? Or?
No, I don't feel I'm an activist. I know it's interesting. I just think I'm a normal person. I know I'm a writer and play clarinet in the Waupaca band. This the next concert. In other places, and also write music for TV shows. I've done that for a long time. So I really feel I'm just like a normal, regular person that happens to be also transgender. So I don't really think of it as that defining my life. I've never really defined me. But in terms of being an advocate, I never have been. But if you write a book called Life Without Pockets, My Long Journey into Womanhood, whether you like it or not, you sort of become one, because you talk and you get interviewed and stuff. I have been interviewed, and if any of you have seen this, the Waupaca County Post, an article. I was called by the New York Times and said, no, I'm sorry, I've been scooped by the Waupaca County Post. It's too late, I'm sorry, I cannot do it. So Angie interviewed me at she got it, if anybody read the article. And so at Little Fat Gretchen's, had great food, and got to be interviewed at the same time. So, but in terms of being an advocate, I guess I kind of will be, because that's what you talk about. But the people who are really into that, and there's so many groups, organizations, transgender groups, gobs of them are very, very involved with that. And I'm members of these things, but I'm not really a very good advocate. I don't get really, now I think I will be more so. But, and as the book says, I was in a photo exhibition a couple of years ago, and that's the cover of the book, was an outtake of that, called Our Trans Families. A friend of mine from my church told me about it, and she said, well, she told me about the show, and was telling me about it, and she was one of the funders. I said, I've written about that topic. And so we went on and on. She said, what do you write? I said, well, I actually wrote a book about it called A Life Without Pockets, My Long Journey into Womanhood. So if you write a book like that, she might think you're transgender. And so she laughed. She said she didn't know, but she did say if I was interested, to talk to them about being in the show myself, because they had finished shooting. So I looked at it looked like an interesting idea, and we met with the producers of the show, and I'm in the show called Our Trans Family. It's a Wisconsin-based show that's going around to different art galleries, schools, museums, and so forth. Now it's going across the country. It's been a couple of years. It's pretty cool. There's 30 other families, and the whole idea just to show these are normal people, all kinds of roles and relationships with kids and parents and cousins and stuff. So I'm in that book. So it was sort of interesting because they had asked me to, if they could use my photo in that. It was a picture of me with my saxophone. It's not my child, but that was what they had, and to use it for publicity. And I said, sure. And it was on their Facebook and other places, so being on their Facebook connected to my Facebook. So, and I was really uncomfortable and reticent, because I don't really talk about this very much. So I'm thinking all my Facebook friends, which is my mother, my dog, and my sister, that's it, not many, might think I'm transgender. So, but it took a while to really be comfortable with that, because I'm thinking, gee, they may not like me anymore. And I finally said, wait a minute, if they don't, if they defriend me, whatever, then I can't worry about it. I can't go around thinking about that. I would go nuts. And so I did it, put it out there, and people did respond. They said, she had no idea you're not living in New York. Most people, because I've been there, that's what I think I am. Another third said, I had no idea you were a jazz musician. And the other third said, I didn't know you were transgender, because they don't know. So it was very interesting. So if I lost friends over it, I can't worry about it. I really can't think about that. I can't, this is who I am. So I'm not an advocate, but I can't hide it, so I don't worry about it too much. But I do talk about it.
Is transitioning from male to female more common than female to male? And do you know men that transition?
She asks, is it more common to go male to female versus female to male? They call that M to F or F to M, and I know many of both. That's a great question, is what's more common. I certainly know many more male to female like me. I do know many female to males. They call those trans men typically, and actually know lots and lots of them. So I don't know what's more common. In terms of difficulty, it's all difficult, so I would not recommend you do this. So I think you do the girl thing fine. Don't go through this, it's really not. However, if you do, people I know who have, mentally I think it's similar, emotionally it's similar, physically it's more difficult. I know to go from a female to male, that's a much more complicated physical process if you do that. But I talk in the book too, it's not, a lot of people tend to want to talk about that. They talk about, I tell people, this focus was on between your ears, not between your legs, because that's not what makes you the male-female. I think people get very confused about that. So, because I know transgender women, for example, who done nothing in their physical body. I haven't done anything, and people don't, but they may look totally like a male physically in that way, but they consider themselves a female. And I think you'll also find too that the millennials, which I'm not, see it very, very differently. When you talk to them, and I've given some talks and know them, will typically say, what's the issue? Why is this a problem? You hear that, and I'm sure you'll probably run into that. So I think it's old people like me, around me, they're the ones that have challenges more about it. So that's what I wrote the book, to explain that. But kids today say, yeah, I get it. And my own kids, well, I have a kid here, Sarah, my daughter's here, raise your hand. Hello? So I ask her, but young people like her, would you say they see it very differently?
Depends on where they're from, probably.
Interesting. So it depends where they're from in terms of children. And that's a great answer, because it's going to depend on the person. Generally, I seem to find millennials you read about those I've met seem to be very accepting, not just to gender, but to any kind of marginalization. I think that's one thing I've found too, that people, the feedback of this book so far, it really does transcend transgender. It's really about not marginalizing anybody from race, religion, background, gender, sexuality. So it really is more broadly about that from beginning to end. Other questions?
Yeah, the 40 or 50.
Mary Jo, you're going over your quota. Only allowed 2. Peg, how many are they allowed? She's going over there.
40 or 50-year-olds, I know, they all said, oh, I have to have a book for my teenage child, or my, millennial, I guess. And that everybody in that generation is very accepting and tolerant, and they don't even blink an eye at their different friends that they have, and that's different from a generation I come from. But yay, all my friends are saying, oh, I have to have the book, and this is wonderful. And
that's great, that's encouraging. So Mary Jo, my friend from Appleton, came all the way from Appleton, said her friends are accepting and are understanding, and even at my advanced age, I'm old enough to be your mother, but but generally, and again, it's hard to generalize, but I think millennials certainly seem to understand and accept it perfectly fine every time I run into somebody. Yes, sir.
Could you talk a little bit about what fatherhood is like for you?
Yes, John Ryan, the proprietor of the bookseller, said to buy all books at the bookseller. That is the #1 bookstore, and the book's only available at the bookseller. Amazon said they couldn't handle it, nobody else, but they refer you to the bookseller. Is that what am I paraphrasing that properly? Something. John, no, I didn't see that. He said, "What's fatherhood like?"
What was it like for you?
Well, I have to ask my daughter. But for me, it was great. I mean, I have wonderful, wonderful daughters. One came in all the way from Wyoming, so it's very kind of her, Sarah. Long way, drove out with her cube car, square car. That's a cube is a square car, and my publisher, Kira, has a cube too. So, but I think fatherhood, I think it's interesting. I don't talk about this in the book because it's kind of private, but I think I could say it here. My younger daughter, Margaret, who's not here, she had said, many, many years ago, she'd gone through her own identity change in terms of how she identifies sexually, and she came home to me in tears, really upset, distraught, and crying. So after a lot of group hug, kumbaya, she told me about how she identified herself, and I said, "Don't worry, Margaret, I love you, I'm your parent, I care for you. That's fine." So this was many, many years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And so I said, "Okay, now that you told me about yourself, I need to tell you something about me." She said, "What's that, Dad?" I said, "What's the dad thing? I think we need to discuss." I said, I was so terrified, because the people you care for the most, your friends, your family, the ones you love, those are by far the most difficult to tell. It's very easy to postpone that. So, well, how about tomorrow? The mountain just gets farther and farther away. And so your children are obviously important people, so they were friends and family, really difficult to tell. So I was sort of forced to tell her. I said, "So guess what, Margaret? I'm a woman." Long pause, and she stared at me, and I thought, this is over, I'll never see my daughter again. She said, "I know." I said, "What do you mean you know?" She said, "I've always seen you as a feminine persona my whole life." And I was shocked to hear that, but that's what she said. And so that was great. Went back upstairs, put my clothes back on again, and she was great. My daughters, I think both you'll call me, they're a GVP, gender variant parent. So they call me that, and I think that would be great for Hallmark to tell them about come up, because fatherhood's difficult in Father's Day, Mother's Day, because I'm not really can claim either. So I'm hoping they'll have a GVP day someday, so then we can get cards. So that's what that is. Does that kind of answer the question? It's a complicated question, though, and I think others will go through it. I'm very, very lucky to have wonderful daughters. I dedicated my books to them, the first page. And I think I hear from so many, even since I've done this book, I'm getting hundreds of emails. And those are all from Peg, though. That she said, tell them to come to the library to check it out. Don't buy it from John. There's a lot of competition at our library across the street, so it's very difficult. But I'm amazed at how many emails are coming in. And that's a common theme. So I'm trying to group them in themes is other people who've gone through what I've gone through have lost their children, have lost family, friends, have been ostracized, have been estranged from the family, won't talk to them, and much, much worse than that. So my heart goes out to them. I'm very, very, very lucky that that's not happened to me. Wonderful, beautiful daughters, very smart, beautiful daughters. So generally that's how it works. But I think I also kind of failed as a father, as my other daughter said. I was a softball coach for a while with my younger daughter, very talented softball player. And I don't do softball, I don't do sports, I don't like it. And I was roped into it, and a lot of parents can be really into sports, as we all know. But I wasn't. It was very not good. I didn't even know what to say. So I'll just throw the ball at the other girls. I didn't know what to do. And she came up to me and said, don't say anything. It'd be better if you just don't talk. So I guess that would be a failure of fatherhood in a traditional way. But you can talk to both daughters and verify that it was not a good, typical macho fatherhood.
Could you bring up the story of the mitt?
Oh, the mitt. I think I'll save that for the book. But Pat, that's you, Pat. I wrote a story. Well, I wrote about a chapter about my challenge with sports, which I was not very good in. There's a story in there called The Mitt, about how my father had gotten me a mitt. Being one of 7, they always got off-brands things. I'd never seen real brands before. Kraft cheese, I never knew what that was. Oscar Mayer hot dogs. We just had off-brands. And so he got me an off-brand mitt that everybody else's mitt really was fantastic because it would open, it would catch balls, it never could miss. Mine was this flat leather thing that was unusable. It wouldn't bend. He said, well, just work it, son. You'll do that. And put it in the vise and put it under trucks and tractors and squeeze it. They did that religiously for weeks and weeks. But it was just this totally flat piece of leather. And I couldn't bend it. And one day I was out in the field, and the book talks about that, so I don't want to give it away, but I tried to catch a ball one time. And I was always going to right field, of course. That's where I was safe. Couldn't do any damage to the team. They always would say, I'll take Ernst's way out there. And a ball comes hurtling out to me. It was literally, the bases were loaded, just like this classic thing. It was the last game of the season, or a little sports league. And ball's coming at me, and the other team members were terrified to see the ball hurtling at me. Uh-oh. The ball's going to Ernst out there, and so I put my mitt up there, thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? So the ball hits it's kind of zeroes into my mitt, and it ricochets on my mitt about 10, 20 feet, just enough for me to run up, throw it as hard as they could, but not far, to the second baseman. They all missed it. All 3 people, 1, 2, 3, went in, and we lost the game last inning. That was the end of my sports career, all because of my mitt. So that story's a little more detailed there. But sports were a challenge. I think I do talk about another point where I think my dad always just said, why isn't he like a normal boy in terms of getting out there and playing with the sports? And he used to he would get me the football regalia and stuff and hurtle footballs into my stomach. And I'm thinking, this is really uncomfortable, because all I'm thinking is, gee, do I look fat in these pads? So it was a difficult childhood, to say the least, for me inside. But no one knew. I had these secret women in my head for a long time. So anyway, any other questions?
Would you be able to talk a little bit about your experience with the medical profession, positive, negative, like just overall, just your visits to the doctor?
The question is experience with the medical profession. Well, since from birth I knew, and my pediatrician knew. And again, it's in the book, but I sort of start with that I was very curious because of my own intersex status, so I spent a lot of energy, a couple of years, trying to track down my pediatrician, more out of curiosity, to see if I could find the records. I couldn't find them, sort of summarize this, but after 2 years, I found my pediatrician. He was 92, Dr. Sherman, and I said, do you remember? I said, I'm Carla Ernst. Challenging finding him. In fact, when I got he had a voice service, and said that he's no longer practicing. He gave me 3 pediatricians. I said, no, I don't. I'm really too old for a pediatrician. I'm looking for a Dr. Sherman. Instead of a friend, a former patient, Carla Ernst. And then the voice said, well, I am Dr. Sherman. So he was taking his own calls. And so he remembered me, of course, and he knew that what I was. And so he remembered that. He said, I said, I'm a woman. He said, well, I always thought you would become one. And so he was very positive, very supportive, and he got very involved in later on with a transgender clinic in Chicago. And his nephew is the head of the UCLA transgender clinic. So really connected, and we stayed in touch. Unfortunately, he passed before I finished the book. He never saw the finished copy, but it was great. But my medical profession, it's very difficult. I have friends who they're sent in Milwaukee, sent out, cut out, said no, we can't service you. So it depends on the doctor. Now it's rare. Where I live in Freighter, which is a huge hospital system like Theta Care here. Eventually, he's recently opened up a huge LGBTQ center. It's a very big deal. It'll take me years to do it, and they're helping, acknowledging people with all the challenges you have. I've gone to, happen to go there, not to the clinic, I go to the hospital, but I happen to go to a small clinic that recognizes LGBT, I can't even say it, gay people, there, and it's, but I went there just because I knew about it in the way the fees were set up, but they're very, they understand hormones and chromosomes and all this stuff, so I've had excellent health care, and their practice has been very good for me. But it is the bigger answer for the country. It's very difficult for people, and that's changing slowly. It is where I live, but that is one of the real difficult problems for many people going through it. Any other questions? Yes.
I don't have a question, but it's more about a comment.
I went over your quota, I think.
I'll pay my fine.
Okay. Well, pay takes other
So
fines.
years ago, a movie came out called Transamerica,
Right.
and I went to see that with a girlfriend, and afterwards we came home and we're talking with our husbands, and after about, I don't know, a few minutes of relating the story of the movie, I realized that she kept referring to the character by the male name, whereas I was referring to the character by the new female name, which was Bree.
Right.
And I kind of pointed it out to her, and she was like, well, yeah, she still thought of her as the male, and I just wondered if that's a common problem where people just refuse to accept the new you or the authentic you.
Okay, great question. People accepting you as whom you are is kind of the question. The movie Transamerica, great movie. The general answer to that, and I talk about it in the book, is, well, just do me first. People generally like to be asked what they want to be called, to respect their gender and how they're identified, so particularly pronouns, he, she, and all the variations of that. I know even the church I go to, they say that up front when they speak. So it's so there's an opening respect to asking people how they want to be perceived and called. I find in my case, it's very interesting, people today, in the last 10, 20 years, people I know, only know me as a female. And if I tell them, if I may be getting a top or a dress that's not quite fitting, I'll say, well, I had the body of a male once. They don't believe me. I cannot convince retail people that, or people I tell. I don't talk about it much, but for some reason it comes up. They simply don't believe me. So I tell them that. Now, it's interesting. I chose to retroactively tell people I grew up with, friends, family from childhood through school and high school and college and later on, and that it took a long time, because I have 3 friends, so it's a lot, I told all 3. But I went through all that, and they said, well, I can't imagine you as a female, or as a woman, but until they meet me, usually when they meet me, they say, oh, okay, I kind of get it. They see that really myself, maybe more myself than I was before. So it's an odd reverse process of this axis of convincing people of the opposite story. People today can't see me as anything else from childhood. When they meet me, they do. But that's, for me, that's what's happened to me. Does that answer the question? No.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Well, it's a
anecdote.
complicated question to
Yeah.
answer. It's complicated. Depends on the person, how you're perceived. I mean, some people, where people know me from childhoods, and I grew up in Chicago, and some childhood friends I'm with sometimes might say, well, I have a friend I go to church with in Milwaukee, who I grew up with in Chicago, and sometimes he will call me a he, accidentally. And I personally have no problem with it, because I know who I am, I know what I am, and I'm female inside out every way one can be. So it doesn't bother me personally. Now some people can get really upset about that. So really, I think it really comes down to respect, human dignity, and asking people how they want to be called. And the whole thing really is all about that, from my perspective. To me, it doesn't bother me.
So, being border Generation X and millennial, phone addict, what got me switching over, the day that I,
You're saving my daughter.
so I knew Carla as Dad until I was 27. That was just the name of this person was Dad in my head. And so at first I would slip up and it was hard to get used to. But when I reprogrammed my phone to say Carla every time she rang me rather than Dad, that somehow switched it over in my head. And I've been able to go Carla ever since.
Great.
There's the answer. So if you run into that problem, there's the answer right there. You switch your phone to the proper name, and that's it. Okay, I think that's it, unless there's any other questions. Oh wait, one more in the background? Yes.
I was curious about maybe your personal opinion of what you feel femaleness means. Because I'm born female and I perceive myself to be female, but I've never identified with like Hollywood's idea of what a female is.
Right.
I wish I was in the middle a lot in society because men have a lot of power.
Right.
And I kind of wish I had that power.
Well,
But I
interesting,
enjoy
yeah.
being a female. So what do you think being a female means as far as like?
Well, okay, the question is, what do I feel female means?
Yeah.
To me personally, it's going to be different for everybody. To me, it feels normal, natural, and who I am. There's no doubt, I don't feel probably any different than you do about being female. Now, as I say in the first page of my book, a lot of people say, well, why do you dress so girly? Because I just sort of girly. Because no girl dresses girly. It has, most people you see walking down the street, you might identify a person and say, well, there's a person walking down the street in jeans and shoes and socks and a shirt, maybe no makeup or anything else that indicates your gender. That's pretty common, and that could be a girl or a boy. Now, if you describe somebody walking down the street who has a dress on, high heels or skirt, blouse, makeup, purse, you say, well, that's probably a girl. Just the way it is. Now, in New York, it wasn't so like that. It can be everything in the sun. It's very complicated with transgender and transvestite and all that stuff, but not going into that. I've always knew I was a girl inside out. And I feel one of the questions people get is say, well, why did you do this? Well, I didn't do anything. I just became myself. But there's a lot of people will say, why did you make this choice? For me, it's no choice. And I think most people on any of that spectrum would say this is not a choice. The only choice in the matter is to live your life authentically as who you are. That's the only choice for me, at least. Because I think who would choose if, let's say you're a male and successful in doing things you do, you're perceived that way, it's on the outside, and you think, you know what, I think I want to get paid less now, 82% of the dollar, whatever it is. I want to be ostracized. I want all the things we go through. And getting dressed every day. My God, this is much harder in life in some ways. Who would want to do that? Unless that's who you really were. So I don't think, that's why I say people don't really do that willy-nilly. But to me, I feel it's in sync with whom I am, how I project myself, present myself, live my life. It just seems part of the whole picture. In terms of, I think, I don't feel maybe more or less feminine than anybody else. I just feel like a regular woman, because I really don't think of myself as a transgender woman, because that was like 20 years ago, really, in my life. I've written the book, so it's more recent, and it came back when I wrote about it. But I haven't really thought about it for decades, really. So it's been a long journey, a long time. It really goes back to childhood, so just living the life of who I am. But I feel normal, I feel like a woman, and that's a complicated thing to be, as you know, and how feminine you feel, and all the challenges just being a woman are a challenge. So I unfortunately got that. My doctor did say, she said, well, Carla, you have all the fun things about being a woman, you miss all the difficult things, so that's probably one good thing about it. But that's how I feel in general. There was somebody else?
Well, my question was something to do with the aging process, which many of us have experienced, all the little idiosyncrasies that can happen, you know, hair loss is, what have you experienced? Are you hormonally going one way, but you feel another way?
Okay, that sort of gets in the physicalness of it. My hormones are female hormones, and my chromosomes are mixed, male and female, so I was born that way. But the normal challenges of being a woman, aging, I'm 200 years old, a lot of people know that, but they're saying I don't look a day over 198, which is good moisturizers, that's my secret, and stand out in the sun, so that helps. But I think I have the normal aging process. I wish I was 20 years old, but who doesn't? But I have the normal aging problems. I mean, I have a peripheral neuropathy in my feet, that's why I have to use a cane, and very poor vision, so that's not being a female that does that. It's the normal problems we all have. You know, hair thinning, hair loss, those things are really no different. When I'm treated by my various doctors who work on me, they treat me as a female, and they treat me as much as they would anybody else, or just like anybody else. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Or the answer? Okay, one more. Okay, that's it, no more. No more. Okay.